Yvette Cooper.
Here, here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am really pleased to welcome back this bill to the House, and not only because the Chamber is the only cool place in the building, and it is some relief to be in here, but this evening we see the Equal Marriage Bill through its final stages in this Parliament, and will have the chance to wish it well on its way to royal assent. We have the chance to consider the bill as it is returned to us from the Lords, with the amendments that they have put forward, and we hope to wish it well towards royal consent. As a result of this bill, gay and lesbian couples will be able to get married just as their parents did, just as other friends and relatives do. And as a result of this bill, couples who love each other will be able to, are getting engaged already, are preparing to tie the knot, and are getting ready for a great party. And I have a sneaking suspicion that even some of the opponents of this bill, and certainly many of its supporters, are rather envious of those on the Elton John and David Furnish guest list. That will certainly be a proper party. Mr. Speaker, because it is striking how much warmth and celebration this bill has received. And I want to join with the Secretary of State in thanking the House of Lords for their strong cross-party support for this bill. I want particularly to thank Baroness Thornton and Baroness Royal, who led our front bench team in the Lords, but also Baroness Stowell, who led the work for the government. And I'm sure the Secretary of State will join me in thanking the noble Lord Alley, who did such a fantastic job building support across all benches over many months. I want to thank too the Prime Minister for sticking with this legislation when those around him called for a halt. And I want to thank the Secretary of State and her ministers, who have worked extremely hard on this. I know the hours that this issue has taken up for them in the department and in Parliament too. And I want to thank my honourable friends for Stretford and Urmston and the Rhondda, who have worked so hard from the Labour front bench, and to thank all my honourable friends who came to support this bill. I am very glad that Labour votes have got the bill through the second and third reading in this House and will support it again tonight. And I want to thank those honourable members of all parties who have voted for this legislation, even though they perhaps faced personal pressures, perhaps from their faith group, perhaps on government benches from their local political parties, and have still voted in favour of this legislation. That is not always the easy thing to do, but it is the right thing to do as well. I will give way to the honourable member.
I'm grateful to Shadow Secretary for giving way. She talks about the other place and taking pride, and I do respect the time and diligence they gave to scrutiny, but can she point to any non-government amendments that have made it through all the processes of scrutiny that we'll be considering today? And does she not see that there's some credence in the concerns of the noble Lord Framlingham, who said, "This House prides itself on being a revising chamber. On this bill it has been a bulldozer. We are being used to bulldoze through an ill-thought-through bill."
Well, I have to say I just simply disagree with the honourable member, and I really strongly disagree with him on this, because I think the Lords have had very extensive debates on this. They've also shown very strong support for this bill. And it's true that many of the amendments that we are now debating are ones that have government support, but I think that reflects, in fact, the level of detailed discussions that have taken place between government ministers, between backbenchers, and also between frontbenchers on this side of the House as well. And so, for example, and I will turn to those amendments in a second, but for example, the amendments around humanism and so on have been now supported by the government, but actually were not supported by the government when we debated the same issues in this place. But as a result of those debates, as a result of the efforts to reach compromise and to make sure that this bill could make progress, we have reached agreement even among those who disagreed on different issues in order to support this legislation and in order to support the, I think, very strong values and the celebration of marriage that we want to be able to promote. Because the truth is, I will give way to my friend.
Diane Abbott.
Grateful to honourable friend. On the question of celebration, can we spare a thought for those persons, including supporters of Stonewall, who have rallied across the road whilst this bill was in the other place and celebrated with rainbow flags, with singing and costumes and free ice cream from a well-known ice cream maker. Because this, and carnations, because this is at the end of the day a celebratory occasion and a celebratory debate.
Well, my honourable friend is exactly right, because the truth is, while we have debated in this House, we have been lobbied, but we have also been serenaded, and most fabulously, by the London Gay Men's Chorus, who sang rousing versions of Get Me to the Church on Time, which we all joined in as the bill passed its second reading in the House of Lords. And I think that was a loud and proud, joyous celebration of love and laughter, of love and marriage. And that is the spirit in which we should see this bill through its final stages this evening. Because as a result of these votes, same-sex couples will have now the same recognition and respect from the state towards their relationships as everyone else. The same recognition under the law for their relationship and their love. And because marriage is about the ups and downs, the long-term commitment through thick and thin, so this is also about the right to grow old and grumpy together under the banner of marriage too. So this is indeed time to celebrate and not discriminate. I will.
Can I thank my right honourable friend for giving way? As somebody who celebrates his 40th wedding anniversary next month, and has had many ups and downs, I may say, but having said that, is this bill not about having a caring relationship with two people who love each other and to make the commitment for life and to make it all worthwhile? Why should they be excluded from having that?
I think my honourable friend is exactly right, and he is somebody who, as I know so well, I would never accuse, even in his 40-year marriage, of growing old and grumpy with anybody in his celebrating his marriage, and we congratulate him on his 40-year celebration, because this is about people being able to celebrate regardless of their gender and their sexuality. And that is why I think this is so important. After we've had changes in the law on the age of consent, on membership of the armed forces, on discrimination, on adoption, this is, in the words of Stonewall, the final piece in the jigsaw to get equality under the law, and it is one that we should welcome and we should celebrate. I will give way. I'm
very grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way, and I wonder if she would add to that list the repeal of section 28, which, despite all the concerns, has done no harm, as this bill will also do no harm.
It's perhaps understandable that there are remarks on both sides which are in danger of causing this debate to become a kind of third reading debate, which it mustn't become. There are Lord's amendments before us, and it is upon those that remarks should focus. Yvette Cooper.
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, and let me turn to let me give way to my honourable friend first.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. Does she agree that by accepting this particular group of amendments, that we will be completing a journey in relation to these issues, which started, as she quite rightly mentioned, with the Young People and Children's Act 2003, which amendments to which were moved by myself and other honourable members to allow same-sex couples the right to apply to adopt, which was opposed by the front bench opposite, and which resulted in the resignation from that front bench of you, Mr. Speaker, and started you on a journey which resulted in you being in that chair this evening.
And in the spirit of your ruling, Mr. Speaker, can I say that I think the reason the points made by both my honourable friends in their interventions are relevant, in fact, to the amendments, not only the amendments that we are considering from the House of Lords, but also the amendments that many people have tried to put and certainly have been raised from the backbenches, is because there has been a debate about the issue about what happens in schools and what happens in teaching. And in fact, we do know that the removal of Section 28 has actually been a good thing, and I think does show as an example that I think people are wrong to be concerned about the impact on teaching. I think there are many safeguards in the law, as the Honourable Member of the Secretary of State has said, around these issues which protect freedom of religion and freedom of belief, but also make sure that we don't discriminate. And that, I think, is what these amendments and what this bill is all about. Mr. Speaker, I want to refer to some of the amendments that have been passed, some of the most significant amendments in the other place, because one of the amendments is around humanism. And we, and many have made clear in the House, that we support the principle of allowing humanist weddings in England and Wales, because we know that 2,500 non-religious couples in Scotland every year already enjoy the meaning and sentiment that having a humanist ceremony can bring to their special day. Humanist weddings are now the third most popular choice of ceremony in Scotland. I gather they are also quite popular for funerals, both in England and Wales, as well as in Scotland too. And we think that when it comes to weddings, couples should, in England and Wales, be able to enjoy the same choices in their marriage as well as in their final rites, and have the same choices in the way in which they celebrate. I give way to my old friend.
Honourable friend is very generous in giving way again. I wonder if she agrees with me that as we have humanist naming ceremonies, as she referred to humanist funerals, is it not right that the whole journey of an individual and their family should have that seamless thread running through it?
Well, I think that's right, that people should be able to have that choice. It is about what are really the most important moments in people's lives, in families' lives, the birth, the weddings, and the death, and saying goodbye to a loved one as well. And people should have the choice about how those crucial events in their lives are celebrated, and that's why we think it is right for people to be able to enjoy humanist celebrations as well. I give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way, and I totally concur with the points that she's making about humanist marriage, and I'm very glad that the government came back with amendments on this. And does she not agree also that there are important protections in the amendments that were made in the other place, so that there's not any possibility of crazy things like Jedi weddings or other things? This is about humanist weddings, and those very, very specific things, not commercial weddings or Jedi weddings or any of the other scaremongering that went on.
Well, my honourable friend is right, and I think that was why, look, we had the debate on humanism when it was in this place and in committee stage as well. And I know that the government had originally stated that they would not support amendments that would deliver humanist wedding ceremonies in this bill, and they cited concern about delays to the bill's passage. We did not, of course, want to delay the passage of this bill or to raise complexities in the legislation that might have caused unintended problems in other aspects of the legislation. And so that's why we did not, in the end, I think, push this to a final vote in the Commons, but allowed this to have further consideration in the Lords, and for government ministers to be able to consider this and discuss this further in the Lords. Certainly, the British Humanist Association have proved extremely willing to work with the government, with the opposition front bench, with backbenchers and with crossbenchers as well, in order to find solutions to the various obstacles that were encountered on the way during the passage of this bill. And I'm pleased that as a result of those discussions, there was a compromise position reached so that there can now be a proper review of the legislation to fully consider the implications of legalising humanist wedding ceremonies in England and Wales, and to have the power to be able to make those changes in future. And hopefully one day soon we will also be able to celebrate humanist weddings as well as same-sex weddings too. I give way to the honourable member.
Well, I wonder if the right honourable lady could assist me by explaining what is the difference, if there is a difference, and she seems to have been using the latter form rather than the former. Marriage and weddings.
Well, weddings are a fabulous celebration, and I really love going to them. I don't love going to marriages. Marriage is something that you commit to for the whole of your life. Marriage has ups and downs. It has, pain as well as pleasure and beauty in it. Marriage is obviously a very different thing to the one-day fabulous celebration that we all want to enjoy in our wedding. But I think it's a great opportunity to celebrate both weddings and marriages. That's what this bill is about. And to be able to celebrate that long-term, loving commitment that two people want to make to each other, to be able to put up with each other when things get tough, to look after each other when people get sick, when their loved one becomes old or becomes ill. To be able to make that commitment, I think, is hugely important. And the honourable member opposite seems to find this something, for Gainsborough, seems to find this something that he doesn't want to celebrate. But I wonder whether he would celebrate that in an opposite-sex marriage. He would celebrate that loving commitment in an opposite-sex marriage. So why wouldn't he do so in a same-sex marriage as well? We urge him to do so, to give us a smile and just enjoy the fact that other people are going to get married as a result of this legislation.
He's never smiled in his life.
I give way to my honourable friend.
The honourable gentleman, I think he's been celebrating his own marriage for 29 years.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And talking of celebration, I do want to celebrate the fact that that Labour's shadow equality team has actually supported this amendment on this notion of supporting humanist weddings all the way through, and I'm very pleased to see this amendment here. We talked about other humanist services. I attended some years ago a humanist funeral of somebody in my constituency. It was one of the most moving occasions that I think I've ever attended, and attested to the value of a ceremony like that for somebody with humanist beliefs. And I do look forward, as I'm sure other members do, to the time in the future, past this consultation and review, when we will be able to attend those humanist marriages. But I did want to say that I really do, I'm very glad indeed and celebrate the fact that it's been supported on this side all the way along.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that, because certainly my honourable friend, the member for Stretford and Urmston, and the Baroness Thornton have indeed had many meetings with the British Humanist Association, and have certainly worked with the honourable member on the Liberal Democrat benches, whose constituency Cambridge, of course, the honourable member for Cambridge, who I know has also had very many discussions with them, has been a keen supporter of being able to make possible humanist weddings as well. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn to the issue of the pension survivor benefits. There's another major set of major amendment to the bill that was passed in the House of Lords. We want to make sure in this bill we are making some progress to address the remaining pension inequalities between same-sex and opposite-sex couples. Measures have already been taken to equalise survivor benefit entitlements for civil partners with those of widowers for public sector and contracted-out schemes, and I welcome this. However, the estimates of the cost of equalising the remaining differences in survivor benefits have so far been very wide-ranging. So I think everyone has accepted the equalisation of pensions would involve some small and direct cost to private pension schemes, but the government asserted at different stages that the equalising the benefits for civil partners and married couples of the same sex after this bill could be liable to a very wide range of costs. However, we have never seen any breakdown of what those costs would be or how they are calculated. And I give way to the honourable member.
Well, to the Right Honourable Lady, would she be surprised to know that the House of Commons Library nor the National Association of Pension Funds can actually provide a list of contracted-in schemes, and therefore we can't actually identify how the figure was calculated?
I think the honourable member makes an important point, because we did also try to find out through the House of Commons Library and through others how you could come to such a costing, how some of the costings that the government produced, how these figures could be calculated, because I think, look, everybody wants to make sure that the approach to this legislation and the approach to the pensions is fiscally responsible, and we need to understand what the costings might be. But it has been very frustrating, I think, that we have not had a detailed breakdown that justifies the large costs, and therefore I think makes it implausible to many experts that in fact these large costs would in fact accrue. And I think many people, many experts do believe that in fact the costs would not be those that government ministers at different stages have suggested would be in place, and that's why it's right to make this progress in the legislation. I give way to the honourable member.
Lady for giving way and for her comments earlier about humanist weddings, which we'll come back to later. This anomaly about pensions started with the civil partnerships legislation, was about to be continued. But is she really saying that equalities should depend on the price of equality? Surely we want people to be equal regardless of their sexuality, and cost shouldn't be the thing that stops us doing it.
I think the honourable member would agree that it is right to get an assessment of what those costs should be. Before making any decision, it is right to actually get the information. And unfortunately, that information has not been forthcoming. And I think that although we have pressed this issue in the Commons, we have pressed this issue in meetings with ministers, including obviously the pensions minister from his own party, who I hope he will encourage to now provide the detailed evidence that we need, because it really does look to many experts as though this is in fact affordable, doable, and will not incur the considerable costs that the government has suggested. So I think that what this legislation does, what this amendment does, is provide a sensible compromise that will not delay the progress of this bill, but allow us to make some progress on pensions as well. I give way to the honourable member.
I'm very grateful. The right honourable lady is being very generous. But would she agree with me that whatever the cost, when contribution rates are the same, whether you're straight or gay, it is not equitable that the pension benefits are different. If you pay the same, you should get the same.
Well, I think the honourable member makes exactly the right point about the principle of equality that we should be pursuing. And that is why we wanted to see the progress made on the legislation, and that is why I think we have supported the compromise position that the government came forward with, so that we didn't delay this legislation, but so that we could make progress, so that we can ensure that the costings are set out, and so that we can then have the power in order to make those changes and in order to establish the equality that we all want to see. And I think that is the right approach to make.
I'm very grateful to her. I just wondered, under subsection 6 of Amendment 11, which gives the Secretary of State power to make an order in relation to pension benefits, whether or not that is something that will come back to the House in any way, shape or form before that order is made, or whether we are actually allowing the Secretary of State powers to make that order without further parliamentary scrutiny.
I hope that it will. I hope that the government will be able to make rapid progress on this and will be able to bring forward orders under this. It's right that they should look in the legal details and the legal consequences of doing so, but I do hope that we will be able to see that progress and also the opportunity to scrutinise in this place as well. The other group of amendments I just wanted to briefly refer to, Mr. Speaker, is for the groups who are affected by this bill, who are sometimes overlooked in these debates and who still face enormous prejudice, for those men and women who are transgender. And I think it's right that the bill does provide that for the first time, when couples want to remain married, when someone changes gender, they will be able to do so. And I'm pleased that the government has conceded and provided for a fast-track procedure for gender recognition certificates in particular circumstances, and I welcome the work that the government has done in this area as well. It was obviously an issue that was considered in some detail in the House of Lords as part of the passage of that bill. I will give way.
On those amendments, does my friend agree with me that they will be very welcomed by the trans community, which often feels excluded from some of these debates and, as it were, hyper-marginalised? And it's very well done in the other House that they were able to bring these amendments forward.
Well, my honourable friend is right, because although there were debates in committee on this issue, it is something that I think does have a huge effect on some people's lives and often doesn't get the consideration that other issues do. And the House of Lords was able to have, I think, considerable debate on this matter, and we should support the amendments that are sent down to this place tonight. I know that some in this House and in the other place wanted more changes to this bill, or indeed opposed the bill in the first place. I will give way. I have given way to the honourable member first, so I will just give the way to his honourable friend, his honourable colleague first, and then I will come back to him.
Right, Honourable Lady. Before she finishes, I just wanted to bring back to a question I should have asked earlier. On the humanist amendments, which she is supporting, there's a very clear timeline here, and that a review must be produced and published before the 1st of January 2015. And yet on the review of civil partnerships, which she supported to be added to the bill at an earlier stage in this House, it is open-ended and there is no timeline. Could she say why she thought it necessary there should be a timeline for humanist review but not for civil partnerships?
Well, I can tell the honourable member that I would in fact support a similar timetable, or even a more rapid timetable, for the review on civil partnerships as well. And in fact, I think at one stage when we discussed that, I was actually keen to see the review on civil partnerships take place alongside the consideration of this bill. So I would be very keen to see that issue progress rapidly and for the issue to be consulted on. It is obviously a matter for the government to set that timetable, and as he will know, many of these amendments have in fact been determined by discussion and compromise along the way to make sure that the bill had fair passage, but I do agree with him that it would be useful to see some rapid progress on that issue as well. I give way to the honourable member.
On the subject of discussion and compromise, in relation to Lord's Amendment 53, I'm not sure if that was going to be discussed, but I understand that the Labour side did accept that amendment in the other place, which provides for freedom for discussion or criticism of marriage, obviously discourse which is not threatening and intending to stir up hatred. But I understand that previously, and indeed in the Labour Party manifesto, there was a commitment to repeal Section 29JA, the so-called Waddington Amendment. Is it the case now that Labour are not going to go ahead with that commitment, if they ever got the opportunity?
The approach that we've taken to the Public Order Act amendment is that our view was that in fact it was not needed, because there is already considerable protection for freedom of religion, for freedom of speech, and that in fact this was already protected. But we have accepted the amendment that the government put forward because we think that again it is right to clarify. We are content to accept the clarification of the Public Order Act, and it's right to support the passage of the bill. I think, as I have said, many times, this bill has been a product of a lot of cross-party, cross-house discussion and compromise in different areas as well, in order to make sure that progress could be made. I referred, Mr. Speaker, to other further changes that honourable members wanted, and I would say on that issue and on others, I think there is already strong protection in case law, in primary legislation, and indeed in the Human Rights Act to protect freedom of religion, freedom of belief and freedom of speech as well. But freedom of belief goes in both directions, and so just as we rightly in this bill respect and protect the freedom of belief of those who do not want to celebrate same-sex marriage as part of their religion, we should also support and respect the freedom of belief for those faith groups who do want to celebrate same-sex marriage as part of those. And it is worth too, I think, reflecting on how far these debates, these amendments and these debates show how far we have come in a short period of time for LGBT equality. When the Labour government put forward changes to the law to get rid of Section 28, to end the bar on serving in the armed forces, to end discrimination in employment and to allow gay adoption, to end discrimination in the provision of goods and services, each time there was strong opposition. But now those changes are taken for granted, even by those who opposed them at the time. And the House of Lords, whose amendments we discuss, has changed its attitudes very significantly since it voted to block the repeal of Section 28 and to vote against gay adoption. Indeed, this time the House of Lords has for the first time been more progressive than the House of Commons, and we should make sure that we don't get left behind. In the Commons, 69% of those who voted supported the bill. In the Lords, 72% of those who voted supported the bill. In the Commons, the bill had a majority among Labour and Liberal Democrat MPs and the support of just under half of Conservative MPs. In the Lords, the bill had a majority of Labour, Liberal Democrat and Conservative peers, and a majority of crossbenchers too. So I hope that this House will rise to the challenge now in supporting those Lords amendments and supporting this bill in its final stages. I will give way.
Grateful, Mr. Speaker, for the right honourable lady for giving way. Would she agree that it's not just attitudes in this House or in the other place that have changed, but fundamentally it's attitudes among the British public? That people's attitudes to sexuality have changed in a very progressive way, that a majority of people want to see the law change, and that if you look at the polling, there is a very clear skew between younger voters and older voters, so it's very clear in which direction public opinion is moving, and that, more than anything, is the key force behind this bill.
I think the honourable member is exactly right, because those changes in attitudes, certainly the changes in attitudes we heard for some of the members in the House of Lords who now strongly supported this legislation, having previously opposed other legislation that provided for equality in this area. And we have seen as the legislation has changed, so attitudes have changed. So legislation has changed further, so attitudes have changed further. And step by step, the law and public attitudes have moved forward in a progressive way, and we need to complete those steps, and hopefully we will do so now with the passage of this bill. I will go.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. It is certainly the case that attitudes in this country have changed, but we have still to see more progress around the world. Just yesterday, a prominent Cameroon gay rights activist was found murdered there. Their neck was broken and their body was broken. Does my honourable friend agree with me that this debate on this group of amendments this evening will provide will provide an incentive and will encourage people all over the world to follow the progressive attitudes being spoken about this evening?
I do agree with my honourable friend, because in fact, as the House of Lords in fact was discussing these amendments and the last stage of these amendments, talking to some of those who were outside joining the demonstrations in support of this legislation, there were some there who are involved in Ugandan and Cameroon groups and organisations who are campaigning for basic human rights for those who live in those countries, who can find themselves persecuted and who do not, certainly don't enjoy equality before the law, but also don't enjoy basic human rights and respect for their freedom as well as for their relationships. So I hope this is not simply the end of a process, because this is not just about the legislation. This is also about how we make sure that the legislation is implemented in practice, but also how we go further in terms of equality. I hope that many of those who've opposed this legislation will come to celebrate it in future. I hope that many of the religious organisations and churches whose religious freedom we have rightly respected and protected will also change their minds in future and celebrate the marriages of same-sex couples in their congregations as well. And I hope that we will, all of us, do more to challenge discrimination and injustice wherever we find it, to challenge prejudice and homophobic bullying in the schools or in the workplace, so that no one is discriminated against on grounds of sexuality and gender. Mr. Speaker, may I just conclude my remarks this evening on these amendments, as I have done when we've debated this legislation previously. I have quoted from those who have been most affected by this legislation. I hope we will just indulge me briefly to just read one more time from an email from one of those who has contacted me about this legislation, in support of that legislation, because I think it is really important that we in this House hear the voices of those who are most heavily affected by the legislation that we are debating. Because I received this from a 19-year-old man after the previous stage, and while these issues were being debated in the House of Lords, he was concerned that the House of Lords might somehow not pass the legislation. And he wrote to me this. He wrote, "Whilst I've known for a few years that I'm gay, it was only 5 weeks ago that I came out to my parents and close friends. Prior to this, I'd gone through an initial stage of denial and then a stage of acceptance, but without having anyone to turn to. The progress of the bill through Parliament has pushed LGBT equality up the political agenda and made me feel more accepted by the society in which I live. This legislation will help young people who find themselves in a similar situation that I was in a year ago. They will be assured in the knowledge that the law recognises their relationships equally to heterosexual relationships. I have struggled through this stage of my life and now live safe in the knowledge that my close family and friends accept me for who I am. History will most certainly be on your side. With the greatest sincerity, thank you. Mr. Speaker, can I conclude my remarks by saying to this House, thank you for supporting this legislation, and I hope we will bid it strongly on its way to royal assent this evening.
Yeah.